so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the one who will be here with you each and every Wednesday, interviewing a different consciousness changemaker that is also out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can hear me discussing topics such as my favorite thought-provoking quotes, reading and discussing wisdom from empowering books, playing clips from various inspirational spiritual teachers, sharing a bit of mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and essentially digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you into positive vibrations on a consistent basis. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on this show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's interview episode, I'm very happy to have Mike Clelland here with me on the show. Mike is an avid outdoorsman, UFO researcher, and author of the book, The Messengers. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a delight being here.
Yeah. I've definitely been looking forward to this. I am such a huge fan of stories and stories of synchronicity. UFOs are a fascinating topic, and you tie all those things together in your book. So very excited to pick your brain about what you found with your research. Before we dive into all that exciting stuff, I would like to ask you, start with the same question I start everyone with. You're in an elevator. You've got 10 floors to answer. The guy next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" What do you say?
I say we need a bigger building. This has actually come up before, the elevator speech. Yeah, like I need to have it. So I guess the passion, the book, I have had my own set of direct experiences involving both UFOs and owls. And from that point, I have been sent on a quest. It feels like I did not choose this quest. It chose me. I feel that digging into my own experiences, as well as talking to so many other people, I am absolutely, totally convinced that owls and UFOs are somehow connected on some mythic level. It is happening in real life. And I'm running out of floors. How am I doing here? And the elevator door is about to open. And for reasons I do not understand, there is a blurring between owls, synchronicity, and UFO contact.
Interesting.
For my research, I treat all three the same. I give them the same power. They have the transformative power. Someone can have a powerful owl experience. It can change your life. Someone can have a powerful UFO experience. It can change your life. Someone can have a powerful synchronicity. It can change their life. For my research, I am treating owls, synchronicities, and UFOs as the same thing. They are obviously not the same thing, but I'm weighting each one of them equally. One is not more important than the other.
Interesting. Yeah. And of course, on the show, a go-to question since day one, actually this month, it is officially 2 years since launching the Positive Head podcast. And I've never missed asking the question. I don't think, maybe once or so, actually, now that I think about it. But stories of synchronicity are something that have been key in my own life and spiritual development and so forth. And so interesting to add, I think of my brother who's absolutely fascinated with UFO phenomenon. I'm really interested in it as well, but he's just like obsessed with it. And then, owls, of course, are fascinating creatures and have sort of always held people. They sort of have that magical quality, right? There's something about them. I think of the movie The Fourth Kind, which I'm sure you're familiar with, where owls and UFOs are tied together. And I don't watch scary movies typically, and this is one of the only movies I've ever watched that really gave me chills. It was I think I watched it with my mother, I remember, soon after it came out, and she didn't sleep for like a week. But so yeah, I'm very, very curious to dig in and see what your research has shown and how you tie these three things together. And I guess before we dive into all the details of that and hear some of those stories and some of your findings, why don't you start by sharing a little bit of your story? How did you end up in such a interesting place and doing such interesting work?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I wish I did. You mean as far as the research work?
Oh, yeah. What's your background in general? Tell us a little bit about Mike and how'd you end up here?
Yeah, I was living out west. I had lived in New York City throughout the 1980s as a yuppie. This stuff was the furthest thing from my mind. When I was about 30 years old, I moved out west and spent about 20 plus years out west. I now live in upstate New York, up near the Canadian border. What happened was... this is I'll try to give an abbreviated version of this. There's a lot going on in this story, but I was living out west. I met this woman that I worked with, and I said, "Hey, you live in this town. You must have." She was working at the same place that I was working at as outdoor program, and I said, "Oh, you must have been camping a lot all summer long. It's been a beautiful summer. It was autumn. I was up in Alaska teaching mountaineering, and." She said, "No, I haven't camped at all. I just haven't been out." And I'm like, "That's terrible. It's October. You got to go out and camp." I go out all the time. I go out for one night. I'll take you camping. So I do this ultralight camping thing, and the weather's beautiful, and there's no reason to bring a tent. So we take very minimal gear, and we walk with these super light packs into the mountains, and and I'm actually making dinner on a rock. And she says something. She says this thing to me, and I'm like, "Well, this is a complete stranger." Wow, I'm really impressed. Right. I didn't expect this. And she says this thing that leaves me kind of, impressed. And then an owl flies over. And then a second owl, and then a third owl. And for the next couple hours, as the sun sets and the moon rises, these owls fly by us. They land near us. They sit on branches. They swoop over us. It gets to the point where we actually lay our sleeping bags down on the ground. Beautiful, calm night, not a cloud in the sky, trillions of stars. And the owls are very quiet, and then what happens is they were swooping right above our faces, and they would blot out the stars absolutely silently for just 1/2 second.
Wow! And
in the next morning, we were like, "Wow, pretty cool about the owls." And yeah, those were pretty cool. So then we say, "Hey, let's go camp. If I do this all the time, if I go camping again, I'll call you." And she says, "Great." So a few days later, I call her, and she comes out, and we go camping one more time. Totally different spot. Sunset comes along. An owl lands near us. An owl lands on a tree branch. An owl flies above us. And for the next half hour, I'm going to say, these owls were pretty close. Before they kind of kept their distance. This 4 days later, same person, different part of the mountains. I actually feel pretty strongly that they are the same three owls. These owls land so close to us. They land on the ground so close to us. They land on branches right next to us. It was unbelievable to have it happen once. Yeah. It was pretty cool. To have it happen twice
in 4 days
kind of freaked me out. It would freaked me out. And now here's at the time, I wouldn't say this, but I'm saying it now. When this was happening, when these owls were landing right next to us, I had this booming voice in my mind that said, "This has something to do with the UFOs."
Wow.
And so leading up to that, I had UFO sightings, close-up UFO sightings, missing time. I had at one point seen 5 gray aliens walking in my yard.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, I dismissed all of it. I was like, no way, didn't happen, impossible, couldn't be, I ain't going there.
Right.
Until these owls in that voice. I was like, oh crap, now I got to look into this. I mean, I kind of knew there was going to be a day when I was going to look into this, right? So when you have like a pot of boiling water with a lid on it on the stove, there comes this point when the lid kind of goes tick, 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 tick. It's kind of boiling.
You got to deal with
boiling
it.
And simmering in there. And so that was what my life was like. I knew that was kind of at that tick, 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 tick. I knew I had to, something was boiling over. The lid was shaking. I knew I had to look into these UFO experiences, but I didn't want to, and I denied it. And that event with those owls was the push I needed. And so I started looking into it. Wow. And one of the things I did early on is I started a blog, and I was like, literally, if you go back to my blog and read the early posts, it's like you don't have to read between the lines, man. It is right there. Like, I am confused. I'm messed up. I just am in a tizzy about. Tizzy's a light word. I was in a place of like, the dark night of the soul, in essence of trying to figure out, why is this happening? What is going on? And also when those owls, and I can chart this, I feel pretty strongly, the aftermath of those owls. I had so many synchronicities, all of them having to do with UFOs. And, or like UFO research, or the person I needed to call on the phone, or the person I just talked to on the phone so I was on fire with this research. Now, the very first day and the very first blog, the day I posted 3 separate blog posts. I've had a lot of synchronicities, but one of the posts I posted was that story I just told. Her name was Kristen, the woman I camped with in the mountains. Now, I posted that online, the story I just told you. And then, but there was something that bugged me. I was like, what was she talking about? What was she talking about the moment we saw the first owls? So I got a hold of her. This was after it was posted. And I said, she had moved out of town. This is 3 years later. This is 2009. The event happened in 2006. So I got a hold of her. I said, Kristen, the first night that we saw those first set of owls, right at the moment we saw that first owl, what were we talking about? You were saying something really interesting. I can't remember what it was. And she said, I remember exactly what it was. I was giving my most heartfelt definition of what God means to me. And that's when the first owl appeared. Now, if these owls, the message of the UFOs, my own journey, were all started here, that account, there's like 100 different things I could tie into this, like weird synchronicities and the threads you pull on any one thread and it just goes to something even deeper. But that she said that, I mean, I'm not a religious person or churchy or anything like that, but that was the moment that my owl odyssey began, when she was talking about the deepest, most heartfelt definition of God. So
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first handful of years, I was a mess. I was searching this stuff. I couldn't deal with it. It was making me crazy. So early on, somewhere in there between about 2009 and 2011, somewhere around 2011 or so, I chilled out a little bit. And then in 2013, I wrote an essay about owls. And that I posted online about owls and UFOs, which was kind of the foundation of the research. And right away, the very first email I got after I posted that online was Nick Redfern. And he said, Mike, this has got to be a book. You got to write a whole book. And so it was the end of 2015 before I wrote the book, before I finished the book. And that was a big deal, putting that project together. So the book is big and fat, and it's 400 pages. And so part of the book is my own self-exploration. I say this book was therapy. It was my own therapy. It was my mental, and I feel a lot better having finished the book. It was like basically, 4 years of being on the therapist's couch in a way. Part of it is my own experience, and then part of that is the research. So both, are the same in a way, because through talking to other people, it has helped me enormously to make sense of what's been going on in my life since childhood.
Very, very interesting. Now, I referenced the movie The Fourth Kind because it's about UFOs, extraterrestrials, there's an owl connection. In that movie, the owls are sort of, people have memories of seeing owls, which is their brain's way of dealing with, having actually seen an extraterrestrial.
Oh yeah, this is very common. Yeah, I mean, this is right in the literature. So my sense is that the scriptwriters of that movie, all they had to do was open up a few UFO books, and they would get flooded with these owl reports. They're out there.
Okay.
What these owl reports are the implication is that the let's just say the gray aliens, that seems to be the predominance of it. The bald heads with the big black eyes. They have some sort of powerful ability to produce a psychic projection, some sort of hypnotic cloak. The term is used as screen memory. So the observer, this is a very typical story. The observer, like guys driving down the road in the middle of the night. Oh my God, there's a great big owl in the middle of the road. How weird is that? Look how it's 4 feet tall. That's the biggest owl I've ever seen. Huh? They drive on, they get home, and then they, I was supposed to be home at 10 o'clock and it's midnight. Where did those 2 hours go? Now later, under hypnosis, there's all kinds of issues with hypnosis. It's a can of worms, and some people swear by it, and some people are skeptical of it. And so the hypnotherapist might say, "Well, describe this owl," and the person will say, "Well, it's skinny and it's got big black eyes and it's got a bald head and it's wearing a tight-fitting little uniform and then I don't think it's an owl." So they're describing something beyond that screen. And there's plenty of accounts within the literature of people actually having interaction with an alien, and then the alien gets right up close and through telepathy, the person, the observer, the abductee, in the presence of these aliens will hear the message, "You will not remember us. You will remember an owl." And then it's not just owls. The screen memories can be deer, raccoons, cats, firemen, dead relatives. Jesus actually shows up a lot too. So there's a blurry world here that's what the owls of the fourth kind were. Those were the screen memories. Now I am absolutely, totally, 100% convinced the owls, the story I just told you with Kristen in the mountains, the 3 owls on 2 different nights. Oops! Right. I just dropped a little teeny brass owl I'm holding in my hand. That was what that clump was.
I have an owl sitting in front of me as well, actually.
Yeah, I'm drinking coffee out of an owl coffee cup too. So, where was I going with? Oh,
you're convinced that the ones you saw in the woods,
those are real owls. They were tiny. They were 12 inches tall. They were close up. They had their little feathers. Right. They were doing little owl things. They were owls. So.
Gotcha. So you're not thinking those were screen memories, if you will, in that particular instance.
In the moment, I was wondering. And we gave him a good, you hear this voice in your head that says something to do with UFOs. You're looking at an owl. And I had read enough of the literature at that point to know about the screen memories. And I was like, okay, are these sure look like owls? They got little owl feathers, and they're, I feel pretty strongly these are owls. Yeah.
Right. Now, you said something earlier that was obviously intriguing, and it sounds like led you up to this point in your journey, where you would even consider owls and the UFO connection and hearing that voice. You had experiences, UFO experiences, and even what you felt like were seeing extraterrestrials prior to this?
Yes, in my youth, yeah. So I mean, I'm 55 now, so 2 of the events happened when I was 12 years old. I had a close-up UFO sighting, and then I had a missing time event when I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
Both of those sure are telling,
I'd love to hear the stories if you care to share.
So the UFO sighting, I was 12 years old. I was with a little friend named Kenny, and it was a sleepover at his house. Curiously enough, this was in Northville, Michigan, and that's where Kristen was from. I think that's very interesting.
Oh, wow.
So Northville, Michigan, Kristen's hometown. And then, and Kristen's, I'm not going to give her last name, but it is a bird name. I'll leave it at that.
Of course.
So, and then, I can't remember. It was nighttime and it was getting kind of late, and I can't remember if it was with him or me. One of us pointed out the window and said, "Look!" And we ran up to his bedroom window and looked out the window, and there was what amounted to like a hovering coffee can tilted at this really odd angle out the window. It was bigger than a coffee can. My sense is it was probably bigger than a VW microbus, but smaller than a big giant school bus, somewhere in the middle there. And maybe about the size of a van, a typical big van. And then it was hovering there. It was tilted at this very odd angle. It was moving very slowly in a way that a helicopter or a balloon simply would not move, descending at this odd angle and rotating. It had lights on it. It was very clear in the night sky. It was bigger than a full moon. And then we watched it for a few seconds and poof, it disappeared. And we both ran downstairs without talking about it. And we both drew it. You know, we had paper and pencil on the kitchen table, so we both drew it right then and there. I still have the illustration I did when I was 12 years old. It's posted on my site. It's in the book as well. I think it's in the book. And then since then, I've done a more updated rendering of it. Gotten over the past 40 plus years, I've gotten to be a better illustrator. So,
right.
Yeah. And then I, ever since that moment when someone had a Reddit UFO account or something, or when I, saw something on, with Leonard Nimoy on TV about, mysteries and UFOs, I figured well, I've seen one. Why would I doubt the farmer who says he saw something odd in his field? Why would I doubt the witness who's, the airline pilot who said he saw something out the windshield? I've seen something that I cannot explain. And to this day, it doesn't match anything that conventional. The other account would have been walking home from high school, same year, 12 years old, 1974. I wanted to be home in time to see the television show Kolchak the Night Stalker. It started at 10 o'clock. I knew.
Good memory.
Oh, God. I clearly wanted to see it. And I was like, I got to leave this high school football game early. So the high school where I grew up was about a half mile from the house, an easy walk through quiet neighborhoods. And, so I get to a little point and I'm walking home. I'm with a friend and there's this point and I can put a little X right on the sidewalk where this happened. And the sky lit up bright orange. Just click on, click off. Like bright orange, back to night sky. And it was like, what happened? What was that? And we went through the little checklist. Was it a meteorite? Was it an explosion? Was it like one of the little transformers on the top of a telephone pole? Did that zap itself or something?
Right.
It was
so
silent.
you're with a friend.
Yeah, none of this made sense. Mm-hmm. So he had to walk deeper into the neighborhood. And I was the first time, we were passing my house first. So I went into my house and my parents were standing there waiting for me. Where have you been? What are you talking about? Where have I been? I told you I'd be home at 9:30. It's 9:30 now. I want to see Kolchak the Night Stalker on TV. It starts at 10. I'm home in plenty of time. And they're like, no. They pointed to the clock and it was 11:30.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like, the 11 o'clock news was ending. So it was about 11:30. And I was like that. And they were really mad at me. And I was like, I was baffled. I'm like, what are you mad at me for? I did everything right. Why? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And never put two and two together until I was actually watching the X-Files and they talked about missing time. Actually, you know what it was? I was watching the pilot episode of the X-Files on VHS tape. This would have been in the mid-90s or late 90s at some point. And it was the very first episode. And at the end of the episode, they said, and now a exclusive interview with X-Files creator Chris Carter. And they had him sitting in his little director chair and he's got a little simple backdrop behind him. And he says, you know why I started the X-Files? I started the X-Files because there was a television show that I just loved as a kid and I wanted to top that show. And that show was Kolchak the Night Stalker. When he said that, I mean, I jumped up off the couch. I walked around the house like a caged hyena, pacing back and forth, oh my God, that night, that was
right.
Weird
It all
sighting
clicked
in the
together.
sky, and that was missing time. And I knew enough about what was going on with all that stuff, but I had never put two and two together until
then.
I'd been reading UFO books where all that stuff is addressed, but I never looked inward until Chris Carter, mentioned Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Wow. Well, there's so many of these abduction stories. I myself, I take that back. I was about to say I've never had a UFO experience. I do have one instance where I saw something at a distance. It didn't seem like a plane or helicopter or anything, but it was certainly not a, up close, overly impactful experience. So, for me personally, I haven't had any of these types of experiences, but there are so many people, for anyone out there who's skeptical, it's like the thing about it is there's so many people who have a similar story, missing time, seeing something very up close. And it's just, it's I don't know how anyone couldn't explore the subject with an open mind with the amount of similar stories there are out there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard. That's people say like, oh, do you have any proof of UFOs? Like, come on, what's the proof? And I say, you want proof? Look at my email inbox. There's your proof. Right. I'm flooded with these things, day after day after day.
Right. Now you also mentioned a scene. You believe you actually have a memory of seeing 5 grays, you said?
So I have a memory of seeing 5 gray aliens. I would have been 30 years old. And I was an adult. I was living alone. I was in a house in northern Maine, and I was actually reading a book by Bud Hopkins and my mind was flooded with this stuff. This would have been the winter of 92, 93. It would have been January or February of 93. Mm-hmm. And there was this bright light all of a sudden coming into the bedroom, and the way the bed was, it was just pushed right up against this window. So I just sat up on my elbow and looked out the window, and there was this bright light out in the yard, and backlit by this light, walking towards the house were 5 spindly gray aliens, about 3.5, 4 feet tall, with the big bald heads and the black eyes, and they were walking across the snow, and they were walking to the house. And I should have freaked out. I should have completely wigged out, locked the doors, grabbed a knife, barricaded myself into a closet or something. I didn't. I heard a voice in my head that said, "Oh yes, they're here. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down." And that's exactly what I did. I probably saw this for 20 or 30 seconds. I remember being weirdly preoccupied with the bright light and completely dismissive of the beings in the foreground. Now, this was not a normal, I dismissed it as a dream. Now, I will say it had a dream-like quality, but I never dream I'm in my own bed. And it had a palpable kind of otherworldly quality to it. It felt like everything was eerily quiet. There was the normal chatter in my mind had been shut down. And this is one of the questions I've asked a lot of people who've had these experiences. Like, when you're in the presence of this, do you have any memories of an altered state of perception? And most people will say, "Oh yeah, I know it just," and then they'll describe, and people struggle to describe this, very eerie and tough to describe. This one woman I talked to, she said, "Oh, you know what it was like? When you take 2 magnets, right, and they click together, right, and then you pull them apart, and then you rotate one half a turn, and you try to push them together, and they won't go together. They're repelling each other, right? So there's nothing there for the visual eye to see, right? But there's this kind of warbly, kind of heightened energy that's palpable as you try to push these things together. But there's nothing to see." She said, "You know what it was like? It was like being in between those magnets."
Oh, wow.
And when she said that, I was like, oh my God, that is the perfect way to describe it. I knew her and I had shared that same altered perception when she said that.
Wow. So what do you think the reason is? There's, and it seems like there's a lot of congruence with people's stories, a lot of overlap, a lot of similarities, where it's people, like yourself, right? So from a young age, you start having these sorts of experiences, and then they seem to continue through your life, and so for the people who seem to be having these experiences, oftentimes that seems to be sort of the pattern. Whereas someone like myself, like I said, who hasn't really had this type of experience, of course, very open-minded to it, and obviously having you here on the show to hear all your stories. So what do you think the reason is that some people are having these experiences and others aren't? Do you think there's some sort of connection, like at a physical level? Do you think there's some sort of a connection? It's more of like a spiritual kind of relation. You think it just has to do with the fact that this is part of your path in this life, where you're meant to help sort of share some of this stuff and connect the dots, so to speak?
I mean, if this was a multiple choice question, and
all of the above.
You just gave me that, I would say all of the above. And I really don't know. I honestly don't know why. The why question, I don't know why it's happening. Why is it happening? I mean, I did one hypnosis session. I've tried it a handful of times, and this was for something that had nothing to do. I've tried it for the UFO stuff in my life, and nothing happened, and I couldn't go under, and I was nervous and scared. And then I did it for something else, just to deal with alleviate some life stuff, history depression. I just went there, and while under hypnosis, I was like the woman, kind of like we went through everything about the anxiety and the depression issues, and then she said, well, let me ask a few more questions. We had kind of decided if there's a little more time just to ask the UFO stuff, and she said, so what's going on? And I, she said, is there someone else in the room? Is there another presence in the room? And I said, yes. And I said, what kind of presence? It's alien. And there was like this. It was just this. There was nothing like, oh, I was escorted from the bed to the ship or anything like that. It was just this kind of back and forth. She was asking questions, and I do not know where these answers were coming from. And then one of the questions was, exactly what you asked. Why are they here? And my immediate response is, because it's important. And so that was my sense. So my sense is the reason they're here is it's important. There's an important reason. I don't know the reason. I really don't. And if I said something, no one out there should believe me, because I really don't know. But
right.
But my sense, my very strong sense, is that if they're here, this UFO presence is here for some important reason. Interesting.
And you believe that reason will become clearer and clearer, I'm assuming, with time.
I have no idea. It may be forever elusive. Our great grandchildren may know nothing more than we know now, or there could be a grand event before we finish this call, and they'll be there, on the White House lawn holding a press conference. So I don't know. I really don't know.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many, many years now, which is why they are the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting the Positive Head podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example that is relevant to today's episode, the show Truth Hunter, which is hosted by Linda Moulton Howe, is a show where Linda takes a bold investigative reporting approach to bring to light details you may have never heard about prominent UFO cases and extraterrestrial contacts. Awesome, right? As you all hear me constantly say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Tell us about your book. You know, obviously 400 pages. It's a big book. Obviously a lot of information covered in there, tying together the UFO phenomenon, owls, synchronicity. Can you give us sort of a broad overview for those of us who haven't read it? What you cover?
I have collected a lot of stories. I mean, it's interesting. They come in, and they have been for about the past 4 years, about one a day. I get one amazing owl story a day. That's a little bit of an exaggeration. Most days of the week, I'll say I get a really great one. So I cannot keep up. I mean, they're amazing, powerful accounts that people are sharing with me. Now, and I collected them, and I've archived them, and I talk to these people, and I call them on the phone, and we do a lot of back and forth emailing. And so within these 400 pages are one account after another, after another, after another. And I tried to kind of build. Start with the simplest stories, and then build to the more powerful and the deeper
elaborate
stories. Well, some of them are very elaborate in the sense that these accounts, very similar to that story I told at the beginning with Kristen. I mean, these accounts, that was a UFO story with no UFOs, but these accounts are so complex sometimes, and they're so intertwined, and they're so tangled. And as I said before, you pull on one thread and it just leads to another set of weirdnesses. And to me, that's proof of something. And so a lot of these stories have that. But I mean, it's to me, it's almost, whatever. At this point, and I think a lot of like people who listen to podcasts have heard everything. Like there I was taken out of the car. I was escorted to the ship, and then I was on the ship, and the next thing I knew, I was on this table, and there was these awful medical exams. And then now, I've heard all those stories. There's none of those in the book, and that wasn't by design. That's just how it played out.
Something different, yeah.
I'd
love to hear some of your favorites.
So here's one that I like a lot.
Okay.
It doesn't have any UFOs in it. There's a fellow named Ben. He's become a pretty close friend of mine, and he has had these experiences, but like so many others in this book, he doesn't have the concrete definition or the concrete defined proof in his memories of, let's say, the people who say, I was on board the ship and I was talking with these little aliens. I mean, there's a lot of people who have those stories, but a lot of the people in my book don't. They have all the other outlying stuff. And so his kids were young, and he's driving them home from a roller skating party. And it's at nighttime, and they're in the car, and they're in the van, and then they all say, tell us a story. So he's driving. He says, sure. So he thinks for a second, like, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell the UFO stories. I'm going to tell these weird stories that he has without UFOs, basically. Mm-hmm. So he tells them, and one of them is a missing time story. So he tells each one, and he tells them a little bit with a campfire flare, let's say, just so not to scare the kids. And then the last story he tells is this missing time story. And as soon as he finishes telling it, this white owl flies out above his van and leads the van down the road for a little while.
Oh, wow.
And so there you have it. He's telling his story about UFOs, and this owl shows up. Now, it wasn't too much later. He takes the kids for a hike in the woods, nearby hiking trail. And as they hike, there's an owl that lands in a branch, and they walk past it, and the owl goes down the trail and lands again. The kids watch it walk by, or it watches the kids and Ben walk by. It flies further down the trail, and it does this for their whole hike. And the kids love it. They think it's the coolest thing in the world. And Ben is a little freaked out. It's pretty unsettling. So that night they say, Dad, read us a story. And he says, sure. So he says, pick a book. I'll be up in a little bit. So they pick a book out, and he gets up, and they're all in bed, and he reads a story aloud. And it's a story called Say Boo, which I actually have footnoted in the book. Little kid story with pictures. And the premise is there's this ghost, and Halloween is coming, but he has lost his voice. He doesn't have the ability to say boo. So he goes up to the cow, and he can't say boo, so he goes moo. And he goes up to the owl, and he can't say boo, he says hoo. I mean, you can kind of see where this is going. So so he's reading the book aloud, and he reads the line, and then Ben looked up and saw an owl in the pine tree. Right at that moment, arf, 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 the dog downstairs starts barking wildly, and he gets up and he runs downstairs, and the dog is barking at the back door. So he opens up the back door and he looks out. Nighttime, nothing out there. His eyes are drawn upward, and he looks up, and there's a big owl in a branch in a pine tree. And he realizes the last words out of his mouth were, and then Ben looked up and saw an owl in the pine tree.
Oh, wow.
Now,
in the book, that was the last thing he had said.
That was the last thing he said. The next thing he did was ran downstairs and opened the door, and Ben looked up and saw a large owl in the pine tree.
God.
So there's no UFOs in the story.
Right.
My sense is this is everything to do with the deeper mystery of the UFOs. Now, we went through a lot of back and forth. Like, I wanted to tell the story accurately, so he would share these things, and I would write it up, and then I would send him the document, and he would go. He was great, and I like it when people do this. He's like, well, no, that wasn't quite what it was like here. It was a little more like this, and this was the emotion I was feeling here, and so that's just what it was great. He was just what I needed to make the story accurate.
Super authentic, right?
Well, hopefully, yeah. He gave me a big thumbs up about it and said, this is telling it accurately. But after we had sort of finished, he said, you know what? These two stories, the white owl in front of the van and the owl in the pine tree in the backyard, these are the same stories. This is about me finding my voice. Like, I had never told anyone these stories. I told my kids, and this owl punctuated it. And then this owl named Ben is searching to find his voice. He cannot speak his voice. He's a ghost that can't say boo.
Right.
And then he said, this is the same story. This is a deep, symbolic message directed at me, directed at Ben. Ben said, this was for me. And it wasn't until we went through the writing process and we put these stories side by side that he was aware that he was confronting some deeper part of his own truth.
Right. Wow. That's really that's an impactful lesson, and what a dramatic way to receive the lesson, huh?
Yes, and as I said before, a UFO story without any UFOs.
So when you say it's a UFO story and also there's no UFOs, what do you mean by that? Like, I mean, how do you tie this to UFOs? Just the fact that it's similar Ben
has had the UFO contact experience. I mean, he feels strongly.
Oh, he has.
Yeah. Okay. And he's had missing time, and he's had enough stuff. So if you're the UFO investigator, right? Someone says, "Oh, I think I was abducted by UFOs." So you show up at their house, and what happened? It's like, well, I had this feeling. I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was these beings around me, and you're taking notes with your clipboard there. And then the beings took me on board their ship, and then I was returned, and it was really scary. And then you, as the investigator, well, thanks for this, and you walk out of the house, right? I think that you should go back to that house and you should say, okay, have you ever had any psychic experiences? How has your religion changed? How has your philosophy of life changed? How have you been experiencing more synchronicities? These are the, and I mean, you can, by the fact that I'm asking these questions, they were answering yes to each of them. Yes. So people will say, like, after their UFO sighting, they've had weird synchronicities, or they've had poltergeist activity, or they are now psychic. What's really strange, and this is something that I did not expect, and I just take it for granted in a way now. The number of people in the book with owl experiences that fall into this kind of elusive maybe category, where they don't truly have the memories of out-and-out UFO contact, have all this outlying stuff, including UFO sightings, oftentimes very vivid close-up UFO sightings. But they work as Reiki therapists. I cannot, it just it felt like I'm going to say half of the people who have these owl and UFO contact experiences are Reiki therapists. What that means, why that is, this is, I mean, Reiki, for people who don't know, is a form of energy healing. It's a form of energy therapy that is done either hands-off or a very light touch with the hands in order to heal ailments, right? So you've got, you've got a sprained muscle in your leg, and the Reiki therapist, you lay on a massage table, and the Reiki therapist just puts his hands over you, and people find benefit in this. That to me is so weird. Basically, it's magic, right? On some level, it's like ancient magic. Right. I just picture like someone in a wizard hat, and you're in the castle, and they're performing this ritual on you, and you're, but that's not where it's happening. It's happening in, people's, basement, on massage tables, or, just on the couch or something like that. So people are performing this. Yeah, why that is, I don't know. So yes, so when I say a UFO story without any UFOs, it might not have. I mean, I cover. There's a lot of UFO sightings in the book, which I discuss, but I don't dwell on those. I'm much more interested at this point with this outlying stuff.
Right. What is the most fascinating UFO specific story that you have heard? I mean, obviously you like this outlying stuff a little bit more, and it is certainly fascinating. What is the most blatant? I'm sure you've heard it all. What's the most blatant UFO story you can think of?
Oh my gosh, I got so many of them. I mean, I do a little thing. I could do a presentation, and I have this I just try to say, okay, I'm going to rapid fire tell you all this stuff, and then
Cool.
people seeing owls before UFOs, people seeing UFOs before owls. I mean, this is very typical. This one's very typical, right? So someone's in the forest, they're looking up at a tree. Oh my gosh, there's a big owl. Look at that big owl on top of the tree. The owl flies off. Boom. The next second, a triangle-shaped craft flies overhead. That's common. For some reason, it's triangle shape almost always. Yeah, what to make of that? There's a woman. She's on her back balcony. She contacted me. She's in Brazil. She's in an apartment complex in a city in Brazil, and she's looking out her back. She's on her back balcony, and then she watches this silvery flying saucer hover and move across the sky very close, and she's watching it. Her head's turning, and it goes behind the building directly across from her, and she turns her head, waiting for it to come out the other side, and it doesn't come out the other side. And she says, "Hey guys, where are you?" And at the next moment, 2 owls zip by her by her balcony, and these 2 owls then take up residence and live on her back balcony for the next 2 months.
Oh, wow!
So there's this owls, UFOs. She took it as a powerful sign, and and this gets repeated over and over and over and over again.
Wow. Now,
so
what is your
here's another one more. So, a woman she's got a condo at a ski area. It's summertime, so there's no skiing going on. It's quiet there. She's up there all alone. She usually shares it with a bunch of other people. For some reason, she's up there all alone. So bunch of weird stuff leading up to this, and lights on in the house that shouldn't have been on in the middle of the night, and her dog acting nervous and stuff. So in the middle of the night, she wakes up, and she looks out the back window, big, looking out of the balcony. And this UFO, this dot of light is flying around. It comes close, and she can see it's kind of a disc-shaped craft, and it zips away, and it's just a dot of light in the sky. It goes back and forth and making these lazy arcs and stuff in the sky. And she's lying there in her bed thinking, "Wow, this is really scary. I should do something." And she falls asleep. And she wakes up, and the sun is up. She's looking out the back window. Same view, head on the pillow, hasn't really, so she's got the same view, and out the window now as the dawn is, the daylight is, there's daylight in the sky. This owl is flying around. Same thing, making these lazy things, flies right up close, and the owl eventually lands on her balcony.
Wow.
And she says it lands and walks backwards. This is really unsettling it. So she can't see its face. And it walks backwards, and it walks right up to the glass. It's a big, great gray owl. Seems owl size. It's not 4 foot tall. And then it walks its face. So then it turns around and looks at her. And her first immediate thought was, "It's a woman." And she hopped out of bed to shoo it off. And in that moment of hopping up out of bed, it disappears. She might have flown away. She doesn't quite know. But she said that, and she wanted to shoo it off, and it didn't disappear. Now, this stuff is very eerie. I've never heard a story of an owl backwards, right? So
something backing up towards you like that, after
and then
that
turning around in this palpable sense of knowing it's a woman. That was her very clear thought.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense for sure.
Yeah. So, it's a 400-page book, and I've got so many that I couldn't put in the book. So, what I'm sharing right now is if I'm telling a story, there's a bunch of stories to back it up, right? So there's really no one-offs in the book or in how I present this stuff. I got to see a pattern before I feel comfortable. And if it's not, if it is a one-off, I'll say it's a one-off. I've never actually heard this story in any other form, but I'll share it now. So.
Right. So you see a lot of similarity and overlap in all these stories typically.
Oftentimes not exactly the same account, but very much the same tone or the same flavor. Yeah.
Right. Now, what is your thoughts on, obviously you said you don't really know what they're doing here, why it's important, but if you had to make a guess, what do you think is going on? Do you believe they're multidimensional beings? Do you believe they're strictly physical beings that are shape-shifting?
Oh yeah. Isn't that that's like, I mean, so right. So the pop culture definition of a UFO is a flying saucer of metal spacecraft from another planet. Now,
Right.
that very well may be part of it, but this stuff is so, like, it just gets so weird and so symbolic, and oftentimes it seems to be presented directly. It seems to be presenting itself directly to the observer, similar to that story with Ben. A lot of these stories have that flavor,
that personal touch. Like, there could have been other people in the apartment complex in Brazil who weren't seeing that ship, perhaps, right?
Exactly. And then this but I mean, almost like there's the lesson that Ben got about finding his voice, was very personalized. I have a bunch of my own accounts that were very personalized in the book. What is this? What is it? Is our little scientists on a metal spaceship creating these personalized experiences that seem to be orchestrated symbolically for one person and one person alone, the person seeing it. So yes, I don't know, that very well may be part of it. But my sense is just to loosen up your definition of what don't be stuck in that definition. The way I'd phrase it, like if you have a UFO sighting, you call the UFO investigator, and they're going to come and ask one set of questions. Why not call like the shaman from the local Indian reservation? They would come, and the investigator, the UFO investigator, would ask questions like, what time was it? Where in the sky did you see it? How big was it? Was it compared to a quarter at arm's length? If you're holding the quarter in your hand, that's what the UFO investigator would ask. The shaman would ask, what was going on in your life leading up to this?
Yep.
What changed in your life afterwards? How is your psychic skills? What's your dream life been like? So those are the questions I think that need to be asked. I mean, both questions obviously need to be asked. You have to have a UFO investigator, and you have to have, now in my opinion, you have to put on your UFO, if you're going to investigate this stuff, you have to have a UFO investigator hat, and you have to have a shaman
Look at all
hat.
Angles.
Yeah, you gotta really look at it from something deeper. So that's my sense. Multidimensional, I don't know what that means, but sure, yeah, absolutely. They're coming from the dream realm. They're coming from the beyond the veil. They're interacting with us on some symbolic way.
Yeah. Do you believe the government has knowledge? Of course, that's a lot of the speculation you hear with UFO related stories and accounts, and the fact that the government is hiding knowledge and information regarding this phenomenon. Do you believe that to be the case?
Probable, highly probable. Yeah, I would have to think that they would have so here's the question, do they have a file cabinet in the basement of the Pentagon, with a handful of files that are kind of interesting about, what some, Air Force captain saw, in flight? I got to think they do. Does it go all the way up to, there's people like, are there bases underground bases where the gray aliens are working side by side with you hear the stories. They're great stories. They make for great science fiction. I don't know where I don't know where the truth lies in all of this. My sense is they got a lot more than a file cabinet, and they and where on the continuum it is. Are there alien bases underground that are cohabitated by our government agents and the UFO pilots? I am skeptical of that. Yeah, but I'm open to anything.
Good. Gotcha. Yeah, that's how I am. Until I've seen it or have firsthand account myself, I'm super open. Would any of it be any weirder than the fact that we're here now talking, in these physical bodies? Not really.
Yeah. and having seen one. One very clear. Well, there's a couple other stories in the book, but I'm going to say that event in 1974. It was 12 years old. That was over 40 years ago. That does not fit any conventional definition of anything man-made. That is something outside the boundaries of the human experience, unless we say that UFO sightings are part of the human experience.
Yeah. Well, now this has been such a great episode because I love stories. The listeners love stories, and you've had a bunch of good ones. One I always ask is, personal stories of synchronicity, or serendipity, or sort of a positive paranormal story. So, curious if you have a particular synchronicity story in your own life that comes to mind that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Okay, so this is one that I think there's no UFOs in this. So this would have been around 2000. I was living out west. I was working for an outdoor school teaching winter camping. So, and I had a great big giant down sleeping bag, right? This big, thick winter down sleeping bag, huge. It takes forever to put in the laundry. It takes forever to wash. So you go to the laundromat, you get the biggest washing machine, you wash this thing, and it takes forever, and you could put it in the dryer, and you put quarter after quarter after quarter in the dryer. So I'm all alone in the laundromat in this little dinky town out in the middle of rural Idaho. And cold winter day, and I'm sitting there reading a book, and this Mexican family is in there too. This is an agricultural community. There's a lot of Mexican farm workers, and so they weren't speaking English. Kids running around speaking Spanish, and their parents, speaking Spanish. And all I could do was nod and say hello. And so, just the way it lined up, the dryers were side by side, and I would go up, and my dryer would end, and I would walk up and put a quarter in, and I messed up. I put a quarter in their dryer. Right. And so then I was like, shit, I screwed up. So I pull a quarter out of my pocket, and I put a quarter in, and I missed my own dryer again. I put it in their dryer. So they're getting,
oh, wow.
I did it 3 times. I gave them 75 cents without totally in the moment, saying wait a minute, I got to put it in that slot. And
you're trying to fix it each time and getting it wrong each time.
Yeah. So I gave them 75 cents, and there was no way to tell them, right? They're speaking. It was to try to bring this up and say, oh, by the way, to try to without, I couldn't speak Spanish. They couldn't speak English. So, after a little while, my down comforter or my down sleeping bag is dry. I put it in the car and I drive, but I go to the grocery store first. So I go through the aisles and get my little grocery cart, and I walk up there, and then I go into this line, and I look up at this young woman behind the cash register, and there was this immediate booming thought in my head. She's an angel.
Wow. And
she was young and pretty, and I don't know, she must have been about 18 and Mexican, I'm assuming. She didn't talk a word to the people in the line in front of me. She just smiled. She had really, in the way I've described this, if you had to cast a movie about the birth of Jesus, and you had to cast the character of Mary, and you would cast this woman. You would cast her. You would say, okay, she's perfect. She looks just the perfect part. She's this angelic glow about her. And I get up to the cash register, and she has the bill, and I look at the thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all the money I have. And I was exactly 75 cents short.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, wait a minute, I'll just take something back. And she doesn't say a word. She pantomimes. She kind of says, no. And she reaches under the counter, and she pulls out her purse. And then out of her purse, she pulls out a little change purse. And then out of that little change purse, she takes 3 quarters and drops them in the cash register. And it evens everything up.
Wow.
And I said, I recognized right away what had happened. Right? This young Mexican girl just gave 75 cents right back, took her money and gave it to me. And I said, thank you. Now, leading up to this, I hinted at this earlier, that I had been dealing with a lifetime of depression and depression issues. Leading up to that, around 2001, right then and there, in that chapter of my life, I was struggling with some simple things. I feel like I'm on the psychiatrist's couch a little bit, but I've talked about this. And so I was struggling with one of the things that was really, really difficult for me after there's all these side effects from depression. One of the things that was really hard for me was to say thank you. Someone would do something nice to me, and I'd be like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. I didn't deserve it. It's not, someone offered to buy me lunch, right? I'll pick up the check. I'm like, oh, don't pick up the check. You're like, it's okay. I can pay for it. That's what I would have done. Where the correct
struggling to accept when something is being gifted to you, or you're
absolutely even abundance. Even the simplest social things, I would had a tough time, and I had a very powerful inability to say thank you. And then this happens. She drops the 3/4 and I am just disarmed. The synchronicity is so powerful. I recognize right in the moment. I'm just shocked, and I say, "Thank you." And I can say with all honesty, I recognized this. I wrestled with this, and from that point on, I feel like I've had a really easy, clear way of saying thank you when people do something nice to me.
Wow. What a wonderful, wonderful lesson, and what a wonderful way to sort of overcome that issue that you were struggling with, right?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, beautiful, powerful, symbolic, poetic. Yeah. And no owls and no UFOs. Yes.
Yeah. But equally powerful, and what a wonderful
experience. Yeah. I mean, it was a transformative experience. I changed.
Wow. Absolutely beautiful. Well, Mike, this has been so fascinating to connect with you, and I'm sure we could go on and on with stories. And seriously, there's nothing I love more than a good story, and you are such a great storyteller. So what is next for you? Is there more? Do you have other books in the works? Or
I got one book in the works, and I got to get it done. It's making me crazy that I can't get it done. It's the stories that were too long to put in the first owl book. So it's going to read like a set of short stories. Like some of the stories are maybe 20 pages. Most of them are about 5 or 6 pages long. But I didn't have the room in the first book. The first book was 400 pages. It would have been 500. It would have been 600 pages if I added all these stories in. So it'll be probably about a 200-page book full of just accounts and as minimal of my editorializing as I can. So just let the stories tell themselves.
Right. Wow. Well, I definitely look forward to that, and we'll have to maybe circle back around and have you back on to share some of those stories again, because these are just fascinating. And if these stories don't make you ponder the greater mysteries and drum up some awe for this life and the magic that can and does happen when people are open to it, nothing will, I would say. So certainly wonderful. What is the best way for people to connect with you and to follow your work?
Well, I've got a blog. You can go to Hidden Experience, which is the name of my site, hiddenexperience.blogspot.com. You can type my name, Mike Clelland, and owls and UFOs. And let me tell you, it's going to come straight up. You're going to find me online. And then the book is available on Amazon or through my site. You can go to your local bookstore, and if you still have one on your main street, go do that. Don't go to Amazon. Go to your local bookstore, walk right up to the counter, and then just give them my name, and the title of the book is The Messengers, and they'll be able to order it.
Very, very interesting. Well, and very fascinating. And I guess these bookstores are fewer and farther between these days, right? So,
it's a sad chapter of human history. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been wonderful. I do have one last question I'd like to leave you with. I always open with the same question and end with the same question. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to Mike Clelland?
The meaning? Oh my gosh. It ain't easy. There are challenges. There are surprises. Within all of that, there is remarkable beauty and remarkably powerful experiences. They are there all the time. You just have to open your eyes and really be aware, and they are there, and you'll see them.
Wonderful. And looking for them is a key element to that, right?
Sometimes you have to loosen up and just let it happen. I think if you look too closely, you get kind of stymied, and you kind of chase your own tail in a way. Yeah.
Sure. Makes total sense. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to connect here. I greatly appreciate you sharing some of your stories and experiences, and keep on keeping on, and until our paths cross again, journey well, my friend.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Excellent. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes, since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting. Your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.